Nnamdi Kanu's warning sparks tension across Nigeria. Before he was kidnapped in Kenya and brought to Nigeria, Nnamdi Kanu has been very outspoken about the Islamization of Nigeria by Fulani cabal through the use of force and jihad. He warned the southeast, southwest and south-south to defend their territory and prevent Fulani herders from occupying their land. Right now his warning has come to realization. Meanwhile, a critic have highlight rising insecurity, particularly in the southwestern part of Nigeria, linking it to an influx of armed individuals believed to be from outside Nigeria. He references a quote by former Nigerian leader Sani Abacha, suggesting that when insecurity lasts long, the government may be involved, implying federal complicity in the crisis. He alleges that certain groups like the Fulanis believe Nigeria is their inheritance and are migrating from other parts of Africa, coming armed and prepared for violence. Former President Muhammadu Buhari is said to have denied that Fulani herders were responsible for killings, instead blaming armed groups trained by Libya's leader Muammar Gaddafi. He criticizes the Nigerian government for failing to classify and treat armed invaders as threats, stating that military protocol requires invaders to be eliminated. He claims that bandits have taken over forests across the southwest, engaging in kidnappings and ransom demands. He reveals that while he tried to strengthen local security, the state government did not support his plans to recruit experienced military officers. He emphasizes that only the federal government can authorize military action against these groups, noting that while military action is ongoing in the north, the southwest remains vulnerable. He argues that Nigeria's security structure wrongly relies on police forces, which lack the capacity to handle armed insurgents in the forests. He urges the federal government to recognize the scale of the invasion and deploy appropriate military resources, emphasizing that without action, the problem will persist. I remember the day I first heard about the escalating tension in Nigeria, a tension that many say has its roots in a warning delivered long ago by Nnamdi Kanu. I was sitting in my living room, the afternoon light filtering softly through the window, when I came across a report that felt both urgent and personal. It was as if the voice of the news was speaking directly to me, sharing a story that had been unfolding over months, if not years. I had always known that Nigeria was a country of complex histories and even more complicated conflicts, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to learn. Before Nnamdi Kanu, a prominent leader known for his outspoken stance on the state of the nation, was kidnapped in Kenya and forcibly brought back to Nigeria, he had made his voice heard in a very clear way. In his many speeches and public addresses, he warned about the looming danger he believed was orchestrated by a network of Fulani herders. These were not just ordinary herders. According to Nnamdi Kanu, they were part of an organized group determined to change the face of Nigeria through force, even through the use of jihad. I remember feeling a chill as I listened to the details he had shared. He urged communities in the southeast, the southwest and the south-south regions of Nigeria to stand firm and protect their land against what he saw as an invasion, a deliberate occupation of territories that he believed rightfully belonged to other Nigerians. The story took on even more urgency when I later encountered an interview with a retired military officer whose words painted a vivid picture of insecurity that was gripping parts of Nigeria, particularly in the southwest. He recounted a conversation where a critic had pointed out that the rising insecurity was not a random occurrence, but the result of an influx of armed men, many of whom were suspected to be from outside Nigeria. The critic had even referenced a quote by the former Nigerian leader Sani Abacha. He said that if a conflict or an insecurity crisis lasted more than 4 weeks, then it was a sign that the government might be involved, or at the very least complicit in letting the situation spiral out of control. I could not help but imagine the anxiety that must have gripped communities that had been living under these conditions for far too long. Listening to the retired military officer, I felt as though I was getting a behind-the-scenes look at a story that was both deeply political and hauntingly personal. He explained that certain groups, particularly the Fulani herders, were under the impression that Nigeria was their inheritance. According to him, these groups were not only settling in Nigeria, but were also migrating from various regions of Africa. They arrived heavily armed, carrying weapons such as AK-47 rifles, and were prepared to use force if necessary. This narrative was especially striking when compared to the official statements coming from higher levels of government. For instance, former President Muhammadu Buhari had at one point denied that Fulani herders were responsible for a series of killings, instead shifting blame to armed groups that were allegedly trained by Muammar Gaddafi, the former leader of Libya. This conflicting information only deepened the sense of confusion and mistrust that many Nigerians felt about the situation. I found myself reflecting on the broader implications of these events. It seemed that the government was caught in a difficult position. On one hand, there were growing demands for immediate and decisive action to protect citizens and secure territories. On the other hand, there was an evident reluctance, or perhaps an inability, to reclassify these armed groups as the real threat they posed. The retired military officer told me that when it came to matters of national security, particularly in the rural and forested regions of the southwest, the Nigerian government had been relying heavily on the police force. Yet, as he pointed out in his candid conversation, the police are trained to detect, investigate, and prosecute crimes, not to wage battles against heavily armed insurgents hidden in dense forests. In many other countries, military forces would be tasked with such responsibilities. He argued that Nigeria's security structure was fundamentally flawed because it continued to rely on police forces for matters that should rightly be managed by the military. During our conversation, the retired military officer recounted a particular instance that had left a lasting impression on him. He remembered attending a public lecture where he had quoted former Nigerian leader Sani Abacha. He recalled saying that if a security crisis continued for more than 4 weeks, it was a sign that the government was somehow involved. This remark, as he explained, was not meant as a baseless accusation, but as a stark observation based on long-standing issues within the country's security apparatus. At that time, there had been widespread complaints about the government's handling of security. I could almost see the furrowed brows and hear the murmurs of agreement in the audience as he spoke. The retired military officer went on to describe an incident that seemed almost surreal in its details. He recalled how, during a meeting in a community center in Kano, a large city known for its rich history and bustling markets, there were discussions about a full-scale national movement. In this meeting, community leaders had declared that the land of Nigeria was not only their heritage, but also a divine inheritance given by Allah. According to these leaders, people from West Africa, as well as from Central Africa, had been summoned to come to Nigeria. They were urged to arrive fully armed, for they believed that violence was the only language that would be understood by those who opposed them. I could sense the passion and fervor in his voice as he described this meeting. It was a scene that, in his words, was as shocking as it was deeply disturbing. The conversation took a dramatic turn when the retired military officer spoke about a close associate he referred to by a nickname that many in Nigeria had grown familiar with, Buhari. This Buhari was said to have a very close relationship with a high-ranking religious figure, the Bishop of the Central Church of Nigeria. The officer recalled a time when Buhari, while receiving treatment in the United Kingdom, confided in the bishop that the killings attributed to the Fulani herders were not, in fact, the work of these groups. Instead, he claimed that a different group, one that had been trained by Muammar Gaddafi, was responsible for infiltrating the Fulani herders and carrying out the violent acts. This revelation was startling. The retired military officer described how, in the military, when foreign forces entered Nigerian territory armed with weapons, they were always labeled as invaders. The standard procedure was to hunt them down and eliminate the threat completely. I was struck by the contrast between this clear-cut military doctrine and the murky, politicized debates that seemed to dominate the discussions among civilian leaders. As our conversation continued, the retired military officer shared more about the struggles he had faced while trying to combat the infiltration of armed groups into Nigeria's forested regions. He described a time when he was in the state of Osun, trying desperately to implement security measures that would have involved recruiting experienced military officers as coordinators within local governments. He explained that his efforts were consistently hampered by a lack of cooperation from the state government. Even though he had a clear plan to bring in retired combatant officers, men who had served with honor in the military and who understood the intricacies of combat, his proposals were met with indifference. The state government did not provide the necessary support, leaving him with little choice but to watch as the situation worsened. I could feel his frustration and sense of helplessness through his every word as he recounted the missed opportunities and bureaucratic roadblocks that had prevented any meaningful action. He went on to explain that while some regions in Nigeria, such as the Northwest, had seen military action in response to the threat of armed insurgents, the Southwest remained vulnerable. The forests in the Southwest were now teeming with bandits, armed men who operated with impunity, kidnapping innocent people and demanding large sums of money in ransom. The retired military officer made it clear that the local police were simply not equipped to handle such a threat. He lamented that in Nigeria, security was mistakenly thought to be a police matter. In many parts of the world, national defense and internal security are handled by the military, not by civilian law enforcement. Yet, here in Nigeria, the entire security structure was built on the premise that the police could manage even the most severe of threats. This, he argued, was a fundamental mistake that needed urgent correction. I remember him saying that the only viable solution to the crisis was for the federal government to recognize the true scale of the problem and to deploy military resources that were capable of handling an armed invasion. He emphasized that while the military was indeed trying to carry out its assignments, it was hamstrung by a legal framework that relegated security matters to the police. The retired military officer was particularly critical of the fact that even though the governor of the state had raised the alarm about the growing threat, no substantial action had been taken at the federal level. In his view, if the government did not intervene and reclassify the armed groups as invaders, then the problem would only grow worse over time. During our long discussion, he also recalled an incident that perfectly encapsulated the challenges facing Nigeria's security forces. In one instance, he had been told that when foreign armed individuals entered Nigerian territory, they were immediately identified as invaders. The military's response was always clear. The invaders were to be hunted down and eliminated without hesitation. However, when it came to the groups operating within the forests, which included bandits and what he described as well-armed Fulani herders, the response was far more measured. The security forces were hesitant to act decisively, caught in a web of bureaucratic limitations and political interference. I could sense the deep sense of injustice in his voice as he recounted these moments where the clarity of military doctrine was obscured by the murkiness of political agendas. I asked him if he believed that the threat was truly that severe in the Southwest, and he nodded solemnly as he recounted that in certain areas the bandits were so close that they had been sighted merely 2 kilometers away from government buildings. These armed groups, he explained, were not just content with occupying remote areas. They were bold enough to come into populated areas, kidnapping unsuspecting citizens and holding them for ransom. The retired military officer, who had once lived in the town of Shaki, a town known for its resilience despite repeated threats, explained that even though he still resided there, he had never felt safe. The bandits had embedded themselves so thoroughly in the local environment that the threat of attack was a constant, ever-present fear for the people. It was during this part of our conversation that the weight of the situation really hit me. Here was a man who had served his country with honor, a man who had witnessed firsthand the gradual erosion of Nigeria's security structure, and who was now trying to explain to me in simple, unadorned language just how dire the situation had become. He told me that the solution was not something that could be achieved by local authorities alone. Instead, it required a coordinated effort that had to begin at the federal level, a call for the President of Nigeria to recognize the invasion and to authorize military action against these armed groups. The retired military officer firmly believed that only a robust military response, one that involved bombing out the insurgents from the forests if necessary, could bring about the change that was so desperately needed. In his view, the fundamental problem was that security in Nigeria had been reduced to a matter of law enforcement, when in reality it was a matter of national defense. He compared the situation to that in countries like the United States of America, where the military is entrusted with protecting national borders and responding to external threats, or in Britain, where the military plays a central role in ensuring national security. He argued that Nigeria could learn from these examples, but only if the government was willing to admit that the current system was failing its people. As our conversation drew to a close, the retired military officer expressed a sense of cautious optimism. He believed that change was possible, but only if the federal government was willing to listen to the voices of those who had been fighting on the front lines for decades. He hoped that the new president of Nigeria, whose administration was still in its early days, would be willing to take the hard decisions necessary to protect the nation. However, he was quick to point out that simply changing leadership was not enough. It was the policies and the willingness to act that would ultimately determine whether Nigeria could overcome the crisis. I left that conversation with a heavy heart, fully aware that the challenges Nigeria faced were deeply entrenched and multifaceted. The narrative of Nnamdi Kanu's warning had become intertwined with the experiences of everyday Nigerians, people who were living in constant fear of kidnapping, of violence, and of an ever-encroaching sense of insecurity. It was a story that was unfolding in real time, with consequences that were felt not just in the corridors of power in Abuja, but in the homes and hearts of ordinary citizens across the country.
Until recently was the chair of Amotekun in Oyo State, right?
Yeah, for some time.
For some time. So what can you say about security around Oyo State and Amotekun?
Until I left, the security was still not okay. There's the influx of these Fulani herdsmen, and I was shouting. I gave a lecture somewhere, and I quoted Abacha. He said, if you are fighting security and it lasts more than 4 weeks, the government is behind it.
So, explain.
Good. The federal government was behind the influx of Fulani herdsmen to the southern part.
When you say Fulani herdsmen, men with cow,
they call them Fulani herdsmen. Some of them don't even have cows. But they were coming fully armed.
Fully armed?
AK-47.
And you said Buhari government was involved.
Wait. That time, everybody was complaining. That time, federal government announced that everybody should submit their weapons to the police. Now, people were complaining that time. I'm saying this thing. There was a meeting in Kano. They said they are Fulani National Movement. In their communique that time, this is about 5-6 years ago, that Allah has given them the land of Nigeria as inheritance, and that they have told all Fulani West African Sub-Region and Central Africa to start coming to Nigeria to come and take over what Allah has given them as inheritance. That's the land of Nigeria. And that when they are coming, they should come fully armed. That's the only language Nigerians understand. Violence. It is their communication. All that time, people were shouting. Their body didn't say a word. But when people challenge him once, why are these people who carry AK? He said they are using it to protect their cows.
Was it true?
Of course, now, very, very false. Now, General Buhari, I know he has a very close relationship with the Bishop of Canterbury. Now, when he went to UK during one of his period of treatment, he told Bishop of Canterbury that it is not Fulani herdsmen that are killing people. There are some group trained by Gaddafi, who the Gaddafi has armed. They are the one that infiltrated the Fulani herdsmen. They are the one doing the killing.
But what did you discover?
I was discovering somebody one day. He was saying, I said, come, you are very close to Buhari. Go and meet him. A general is a soldier for life. Asking that in the military, when foreigners enter your territory, carry arms, what is it you are told in the military? They are described to us as invaders.
Invaders.
And what did the military say we should do with them? We are to hunt them down like rabbits and eliminate them. I said, go and meet Buhari and ask him.
He didn't hunt them down?
Who are the people doing the kidnapping? Who are the people? They like refer to them as bandits. Who are the people carrying out the banditry?
Are they in our forests around here?
The entire Yoruba land is occupied by them.
As we are talking now?
As I'm talking to you.
General Togun?
Yes.
So when you were in Amotekun, did you try to tackle them?
I did everything I can. But I didn't have cooperation.
Cooperation from who? From Oyo State Governor?
Government, yes.
Oyo State Governor?
Yes.
How?
I can't start saying all these things.
At least give us a hint. What is it that you wanted?
Come. I wanted NCOs from the military, non-commissioned officers, to be recruited, to be put as coordinators in the very local government. I couldn't achieve that.
Why? What was the reason? They were not available to be recruited or what?
They are available. Now, I don't want to talk more on this. I said they are supposed to be zonal commanders, and I wanted retired combatant officers of the rank of captain or major to be zonal commanders of Amatekun in various zones.
You didn't achieve that.
I didn't achieve it. I don't want to delve much in that area.
But are we under threat in the southwest?
We are still there. The governor the other said that bandits were about 2 kilometers away from where he had his body. But that is, the entire Ibarapa, the entire Okeogun, they are saturated.
Wait.
With these people.
They are in the forest. They are with guns.
Of course.
What do they want?
They have said it. That Allah has given them the land of Nigeria as their inheritance. That's what they were.
They are camped in the forest?
They are all over.
You just came from Shaki?
Yeah.
You came, but you still live in Shaki?
I live there.
So why are you still there if they are all over?
They can't come and attack me.
They are not coming out of the forest?
They are coming out and kidnapping people and taking ransom.
Is there anything we can do? Is there anything we can do as a people? What do we do? You are a retired military officer. You've operated within Amotekun. What do we do?
The only thing is that the government, even up to federal level, should look for people who will tell them the truth and they will follow the truth.
What is the truth?
The truth is that there's an invasion.
But we can stop them.
It is only government that can do it.
Can the military bomb them out of the forest?
The military is trying now because they give them the assignment. But security is a military matter anywhere in the world. But in Nigeria, we hand over security to police. Police is only to detect, identify, combat crime and prosecute crime. Crime is not security. I know areas of security that the military can use for American government. I know areas of security that the British military handle for Britain, and the same thing Germany, all over the place. But here they think security is police matter, which is not.
The governor has raised the alarm. You are also raising the alarm again.
What I'm saying now is that, okay, it's only in Nigeria. Everything security. Ask the police. When they are handling internal security problem, when it is beyond their power, what do? They call on army. Is there. That what happened in Zaria, that they said army went and shot students. The police could no longer handle that problem. So there's a form they feel inviting army to come and take over. And it is not every army officer that is a security man.
You are a combatant officer.
Yes.
And that was why the governor chose you to come in at the time when you came in. Mm-hmm. Would you say you were successful during your time?
I was not, because I was not given the opportunity to operate.
Does Amotekun need automatic weapons?
Of course.
Because you cannot tackle the bandits in the forest.
Listen, I know, I know. But it is there in the law establishing Amotekun that the IG, that the Amotekun people, the state government can apply to the IG to approve weapon for Amotekun, but the IG will not do it.
Now we have a Yoruba president. You have complained about Buhari. Buhari's era is gone. This is Tinubu's era. A Yoruba man. Don't you think something will change?
If he gets people who will tell him the truth and give him the advice on how to handle it. That's all.
Have you tried to advise him?
I don't have any connection with him.
Advise him now.
The issue, like I said, they should stop handling security matter only to police.
But soldiers are involved. You were brought in because you are a retired military officer.
Who and who?
I know, so at some point the governor brought in the military to invade the forest. I think that was
the governor hasn't got power. It's only the president that can involve the military. He's the only commander-in-chief who can say yes, go and do this.
So Tinubu should tell the military not to move in?
They are already moving.
In the southwest?
No, not in the southwest.
Because they are bombing them in the northwest.
Yes.
And the governor said they are now running to the southwest.
They are not running to that. They are already in the southwest. That's what I'm saying. They are already here.
Did you see them in the forest?
Come. When they kidnap, we are using hunters. They go in. They find that it's a Fulani houseman.
The hunters will see them.
Yes.
And we cannot attack them.
The only thing was that we told those hunters they should be careful. If they kill, who's going to back them up? To say yes.
You have to wait for you to give.
All we do is just make sure that when they go to look for them, they run away.
So why do we have Amotekun? What do we need then if it's not?
Amotekun is not independent. Amotekun is stated clearly there. Amotekun is to assist police.
So Amotekun cannot invade the forest and get the bandits.
Come, if Amotekun wants to invade, police will take the lead. Because Amotekun is said to assist police. Even if Amotekun arrests, they investigate, they hand over back to police for prosecution.
And that cannot solve the problem.
Exactly. People have to move into the bush, patrol. Police will not do it. And if police refuse to do it, Amotekun can't do it. Because it's to assist police. So police will be the one, Amotekun, let us go on patrol.
This is the end of our news update. Please click the icon on the top right corner of your screen to watch my next video. You will enjoy it. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now.